everyone. Oh, I hope everyone had a good lunch. Mine was fantastic. Okay, so we're into the third part of our day, the buyers and sellers panel. And earlier today, we talked about unconscious bias and what goes into our decision-making, particularly as it regards casting. And our last panel, as you know, was focused on how to actually make content. So now we're going to talk about how to get that content in front of people. But first, let me introduce my guests. So next to me is Emily Best. She's the CEO and co-founder of Seed and Spark, a crowdfunding and distribution platform that has the highest success rate in the crowdfunding business. Emily started as an actress and was also a film producer and has personally raised over $4 million for both Seed and Spark and her own film projects. Next to her is Gary King. He is the Director of Development at Machinima, which is a digital network focused on fandom and gamer culture backed by Warner Brothers and Google. He previously was at Disney ABC, where he was responsible for alternative programming and new media content, which included the day-to-day management of unscripted shows, scripted short-form programming, and events and specials. Prior to Disney, he spent over 2 years at the Yum Yum F Network, Justin Lin's digital production company. Next is Sujata Day, an actress, writer, and director. As an actress, she's best known for her starring role in Issa Rae's Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl. She now currently recurs on HBO's Insecure. As a content creator, she was recently accepted into the Sundance YouTube New Voices Lab, and her film directing debut, Cowboy and Indian, is currently screening at festivals. Next is Aaliyah Williams, Vice President of Digital Content and Production at Macro, the leading authoritative media brand representing the voice and perspective of persons of color. Macro is known for such films as Fences and the upcoming Mudbound, as well as the highly anticipated digital series, which we saw a trailer of, Hentified, which Aaliyah oversees. Aaliyah previously created and produced branded content for Fox Digital Studio, AOL, and BET. She also ran the content division of Russell Simmons' YouTube channel, All Def Digital. And last but not least is Sam Leigh, producer, manager, and marketing executive at InArtist, working with top and emerging digital and traditional creators and performers. He is a US Navy vet who has worked at a top agency and also in film producing. His focus now is to apply a traditional approach to new media artist management and content packaging, development, and sales. Let's give them a round of applause. So I will just briefly introduce myself as well. I'm Elaine Loh, and I'm an actor and member of the local board of SAG-AFTRA. But I also write, direct, and produce my own content, as I know many people here today do as well. So I'm going to start my questions off from that perspective. How do we sell you something? That's the first question. So let me give a little more detail. Maybe my buyers can talk a little bit about how potential content gets in front of you. Do you go to festivals? Do you watch things online? Do you take general meetings? And if you're one of my sellers, maybe you can talk about how you're able to get someone to distribute your work or your client's work. Whoever, like to start?
Hi. So we all of the above. Take general meetings, go to festivals, go down all types of online rabbit holes. I slide into people's DMs all the time, in a very respectful way. But I think the way to grab attention is to really know what your product is. So, whatever the series is, really understand it backwards and forwards, and be able to talk about where you see the series going over the course of a season, if you have episodes mapped out and all of that good stuff, is very helpful. It's interesting. I think a lot of people, we pitch in a format that's very just all words, but like the actual product is quite visual. So I really always force people to create a visual treatment of sorts so I can understand what this is gonna be looking like. So any way that you can give me some type of pass into your brain to understand what is in your brain visually and tonally is super helpful before we make any decisions about working together.
Just to add to that, the rabbit holes are very deep. General meetings always help, but for me, I rely a fair amount, I think, on word of mouth. Like just through my network of friends, through creatives. What are you watching? Who are you talking to? What's getting you excited? What should I be on the lookout for? So for me, a lot of it really does come from people doing the self-starting, self-generating of just getting their work in front of the right people so that you can play that game of 6 degrees of separation.
That made me turn my microphone on because I was really hoping someone would say that. I think this is one of the most important and undersaid things in Los Angeles, where we get obsessed with, like, who are you meeting with? And anyone that I've talked to recently about, like, when did you get representation? And they all say right about at the moment I didn't need it. Because they were making so much work on their own. And what we do at Seed and Spark is really build the tools for you to do that kind of self-starting. It does not start with crowdfunding. It starts at the very beginning with understanding your project and understanding who it's for and starting to engage those people in the communities where they are, in the online forums where they are, building relationships with your audience long before you're actually ever making anything, so that they are part of your community before you ever go out and ask for $1, right? We're not gonna be like, hi, nice to meet you, can I have 20 bucks? You can't do that online either, which I think is a wrong way that a lot of people approach crowdfunding. So what we do is we start with education. We have an online course, we have an in-person course that's really about helping you understand the actual things you have to do to go out and start building and understanding your audience in advance of making something. That helps you understand, like, when it's time to start crowdfunding, that helps you understand how to run a kick-ass crowdfunding project so that you have the resource. And most importantly, we help you gather the data about your audience that will be valuable to buyers. Where they are in the world, what social media channels they found you on, what other platforms and devices they prefer to watch on, the business metrics that you need that will really help buyers understand exactly the kind of market you're in. So you're doing two things at one time. One, you're creating the word of mouth, right? And two, you're creating value in your intellectual property before it exists. And that's actually a brand new opportunity of the internet. That is not a thing that used to be true. You used to have to make something, and then if someone bought it, it would or wouldn't have value. But now you can actually create intrinsic value in the intellectual property before it exists. And there may be zero better example in modern day than Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl turning into Insecure. I would say one other case study to really examine is what Justin Simien did with Dear White People, which started as a Twitter account. And his writing process was to tweet in the voice of this girl in his head who was becoming a character and building audience, and on the back of that, you know, making a teaser that turned into a crowdfunding campaign. The success of that crowdfunding campaign brought in an equity investor. The Sundance premiere, it didn't sell at Sundance, just so you guys know. It sold many months later and not for a profit, but what happened was because Justin knew his audience so well, he got hired by Lionsgate to make these rad digital shorts to promote the film. And I think what he was actually doing, because he's so shrewd, was training himself for show running the show that he now show runs. Right? Like, it was all part of a master plan, and that's how well he saw the future of this and how well he knew the world, and it's because he'd been practicing all along. So I think that the cool thing is, like, literally today, right now, from your pocket, you can be doing the audience building work to generate the word of mouth, and a plan for how you're gonna get to these people, not by calling them or cold calling them, but by them slipping into your DMs, because they're like, I heard about you.
I'll be there. But no, I mean, like, all of that is so important. The main thing is audience's value. And so if you have content that you're creating that resonates with an audience, that makes them want to talk about it and share it, there's nothing more valuable than that. And that's what we pay attention to. And the other thing that I pay attention to is people who I may meet initially or reach out to me initially, and it's like the seed of an idea. And for whatever reason, there was nothing that I could do at that point, but you meet them months later and they're like, we're just making this. Or, you know, I like to see trains moving. So if you're already just like, we're headed to our next destination, hopefully you'll meet us in Joplin. I'll figure out a way to get to Joplin.
Sujata, do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences as one of those people who was making their things and putting it out there?
Yeah, I would say that I define myself as a very smart hustler. And I don't hustle in an annoying way, but I hustle in a way where I definitely know I have something to offer the buyers. So, for example, in terms of, I have a project at Macro, and I reached out to Charles King at the end of season 2 of Awkward Black Girl, when I had no representation. And he was working at WME, and I was like, maybe he'll want to rep me. And I just reached out, and I was like, I would love to be rep by you guys. And he was like, you know what, like, I can't do that for you right now, but I'd love to stay in touch. And he had seen Awkward Black Girl, seen the potential in it, and it was about, and we definitely stayed in touch. And
You guys were social media friends.
we were social media friends, and I became social media friends with his wife, and and it was awesome. And
That's the hustler move.
get to know the wife. And then it was about a year and a half later when he left WME to start Macro, and I was like, I want to pitch him stuff, but not right now. And about 6 months later, I emailed him at Macro, and I was like, I have 3 things I'd love to pitch your company. He's like, come on in. So I pitched him 3 things at a meeting, and then I think all of the projects kind of went around the company, and one of them got passed to Aaliyah and Mike, and I forget when, this was probably like a year and a half ago, and went back in for another meeting, and about the lookbook that Aaliyah was talking about, I had no lookbook for this project, and I was like, what the fuck is a lookbook? And
Sent you some examples.
and my first pass at a lookbook was awful. It was like pink and white or something, really, really bad. And then I got some opinions from my friends, and I kind of love what I had come up with that I sent to you guys. And it was really fun making the lookbook because I didn't have any tape on the script, the pilot script that I had written. And it really helped me visualize it and imagine it. And I think that's what also helped Macro do that as well. But this was a huge, long process. This was like, I guess since the day I emailed Charles, that was probably like 4 or 5 years ago, and until the point of like getting this new project to Macro. And so you gotta be in it for the long game. You can't just be like, Awkward Black Girl was Issa Rae's 3rd web series. I don't think people understand that. Like, she has been in this game for so long, and your first web series might not get attention. Your 3rd web series might not get attention, but maybe it's your 5th or your 6th. You know, you just have to keep doing it and keep believing in your work until the audience finds you.
Sam, I think you're the only one. Do you want to add something?
Thanks, SAG, for having this, putting this on. This is great. And trailblazers up here. It's amazing to be, and humbling to be a part of this panel. So thanks to be able to add to the discussion at all. It's amazing. Is this on? You know, from a talent standpoint, we work with top and emerging, and you know, for the emerging talent looking to expand on their IP and you know, realize properties to a saleable point, everybody in this room has faith in themselves, right? We all have faith in what we're doing. We believe in what we're doing. You know, it's good to have a team member with you to say, hey, I believe in what you're doing as well, and I share the vision, but that faith has to also embody patience and understand that you're not under deadline. You're not a signed writer. You're not, you know, you don't have a first look somewhere. So there's no need to be hasty in getting something together and, and just sending it around town as soon as possible. So we have a very grueling we take our time line by line, and we realize IP to saleable properties, but only after, we talk about Issa Rae and with Insecure, we talked about 3 years from, the sale of the show to the time they shot the pilot, which is insane, but that's pretty much, par for the course. And the idea behind that is not under deadline. Take the time, send it out to friends, to coverage companies here in LA, the same coverage companies all the big 3-letter agencies use. Nobody reads scripts anymore. Assistants don't read scripts. They send them out to coverage agencies. You could do the same for $80, and get your stuff looked at. We all feel like the work we've done, I'm there, I'm ready, I need to sell this, but likely at that point you're still not ready. And it's about kind of taking the time to be patient, to put together the right work, develop your process, develop the project. Yeah.
Well, and the nice thing right now is you can be doing 2 parallel tracks. And one is like just making shit and getting it out there and honing your craft and building an audience and like failing publicly and spectacularly and then but making that kind of a part of the interaction with your audience. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? I just met with some filmmakers in Austin who didn't go to film school. They were actors, and they decided it was time for us to like really make our own stuff. So they committed to a deadline up for themselves of making 12 shorts in a year, 1 short a month, and with each short they would teach themselves a new skill. So their first one was a silent film, because they're like, we're not ready for sound yet, let's work on picture, which I thought was so smart. And you should follow them on social media. They're called Turtle Dove Films out of Austin, Elena Weinberg and Duncan Coe. And they just taught themselves in the process. They made content in the process. They built a Twitter following and got so good at social media that their side hustle now is social media consulting for other projects and crowdfunding consulting for other projects. So I think it's just interesting to remember that you get good and you stay good by making stuff. You can't always be waiting to make stuff. If you are making something, like if you write something and you're waiting for someone to pick you, that is not independent filmmaking, that's dependent filmmaking. So make sure you pursue your line of independent filmmaking. If there is a roadblock in your way, push it out of the way and do the next thing that you have to do to make the thing. And I really think like that's how we get to keep getting better at it, because like I haven't actually seen the first 2 web series. I don't know. I mean, I am such a fan of her work at this point. Like she could walk around in a paper bag and I'd be like, that's hilarious. But like they might not have been there yet, Like you're gonna have to make a lot of shit that sucks in order to make stuff that's really good, right? But in today's, what was I gonna say? In this day and age, that sounds so ridiculous.
Right now.
Right now, thank you. She's used to editing people, you can tell. Right now, you can make stuff and build audience and hone your craft all as one line while you are polishing this stuff and getting it ready for sale, so that by the time you walk into the room, like you walk in with all of that, like 360. I got audience, I have experience, I have technical skills, and I have polish. And that would, that's rad when you see that. I can't remember who it was, Keenan Ivory Waynes on a panel at Austin Film Festival was like, you have to be, I think the word he used was monster to be in this business. You have to be a monster. And he, like, the word, I found it really challenging. And then I thought, think of the people who are really successful, who you really admire. They're monsters. Like, they can work harder and be more tough on themselves and, like, rally a community and speak to the crowd, all of those things. And so you have to, like, work up to your monsterness, I think. It doesn't have to come naturally.
And if you can't be a monster and all that, like, not everybody's a monster, right? Like, some people you meet and you're like, wait, you can go ham on like writing and directing and marketing yourself and your content. Like, not everyone is like that. But you can be open to collaboration and making sure that your collective team is like the most monster team ever. So don't feel like,
You don't have to monster alone.
Collective monster.
You can
the
do a collective.
Way scarier. The monsters that are made up of like 10 people, way scarier.
Yes. Squad.
It's a shitty metaphor, all right?
Well, I think they made this movie, Monsters, Inc. So since today is co-sponsored by the Diversity Committee, I'd really like to discuss how diversity and inclusion relates to your work, because I know that it's part of each of what you do, so I thought you could tell us a little bit about it.
Well, diversity and inclusion is integral to Macro's mission. It's the reason why Charles started it, but it is something that is that has to be worked on constantly, right? Like it's something that has to be talked about in every conversation and every aspect of the process of making something, whether it's finding the writers, casting, to finding the directors. I'm always in conversations like, well, this is a project that's focused on the Mexican American community. I'd really love, to find some Mexican American writers, specifically Mexican American. And you get a lot of pushback, like, well, do they have to be like, yes, they do. So, and if you don't represent them, that's cool. I will find them other ways. So it really has to be a very in-your-face, diligent process for every aspect. Like aspects that, like the editor aspect of it all, people think, oh, well, that doesn't matter. Yes, it does, because I am so annoyed when I get cuts of things and you'll see the person of color in a scene is just, it's not the right angle for them, but they're the one who is like the star of that particular scene, and it's like, wait, is that the only select we have? Like, that can't be right. So perspective is important, therefore inclusiveness of those perspectives is paramount, and that's a daily thing.
Sujata talks a lot about, you could find a lot on Sujata online, obviously, and I saw that you talk a lot about taking back the narrative. And from a metric standpoint, in general, the sort of diversity, the culture, you guys probably, what's a white dude doing up there in a suit? Because from a back end standpoint, I see that 49% of Gen Z and millennials are now identifying as diverse, and these are the kids that are watching what you guys are going to try to put out. And so if we're not, from a 360 standpoint, representing this kind of new wave of culture, stuff's it's just not going to sell. The content has sort of been bifurcated. Old kind of white dude, it's not working anymore. And so, from a talent standpoint, we do look for unique voices, be they veterans, underrepresented, or Mexican Americans. You think about gentrification. These kinds of content, this kind of content's coming from voices that, for the first time, are the actual authentic voice of that kind of subject matter, and that's more in demand now than ever, and it's only going to grow. So, yeah, key.
For us as producers, executives, and creators, it's really about effort to flip the narrative, I think. Coming from the company I come from, where we're oftentimes associated with a gaming audience, with an esports audience, the narrative generally tends to skew towards white and male, when reality is a third of our audience is women. A huge portion of our audience is minority, but because we're perceived as white and male through the lens of gaming, the challenge is really on me, and the challenge is on us to sort of flip that narrative and to show that, no, the audience deserves to be representative in a way that reflects who this demographic really is. So that challenge is on me, it's on us, it's on everybody in this room to sort of flip that narrative.
You give me the best segues. So you guys know the statistics, I'm sure, and it's shitty to trot them out, right? About the dismal percentages of women and people of color represented behind the camera. It gets worse if you look at ability and class and geography, even like where people have come from, and age is a big one. Ageism is a real thing in Hollywood, but it starts at like 35. It's like you don't even have to get old here. You just have to get sort of like a little bit experienced, and they're like too old. our attitude is the only way we solve it is if literally all of us participate in solving it. So at Seed and Spark, anybody who launches a crowdfunding campaign has to make a public-facing statement about how their project increases inclusion. And we use this word because everybody knows what it feels like to be excluded, and everybody knows that how to think about inclusion. You can include people. For us, that is just as important behind the camera as in front of it, because as one of the previous panelists once said in front of me at an event, I'm not interested so much at who the camera's pointed at. I'm interested in whose lens I'm looking through. And that now, that is the entire way we think about curating our subscription streaming platform, is how many different lenses can we show you on similar subjects. And that's what is so interesting about, I mean, even just looking around this room, think about if each of you made a movie about the same thing, how different those would be, because how many windows into the world we'd be getting. But basically that like every single artist right now needs to be thinking about how they are contributing to greater inclusion. And sometimes it's just by getting your story told. And then you can take it a step further and look at who you're bringing on to tell your story. Because I personally think we don't even know a lot of things about cinema that we, like the stuff that's coming out about cinematographers lighting for black skin, right? And all of a sudden people are like, oh, literally the way we make movies is racist.
Yeah, I
Like
mean, but it's not even just the way we make. I mean, this is something that started with the advent of the camera.
Yes, the
And
technology
so the whole, like,
is biased.
Color wheel, and how lighting has been taught, how cinematography has been taught. It's about white skin. So
literally bringing in diverse perspectives is going to change the technology of cinema. It's going to change the techniques of cinema. It's going to change the stupid fucking hierarchy on set of cinema. It's going to change all of those things if we are all actively involved in creating that new future. And so that part is also really exciting, but it's very central to like how we talk to our creators.
In terms of diversity with being an actress and writing, I sometimes feel like, along with you guys, that we're on the front lines of this. And I will just tell a little story about a show that I auditioned for that premiered this year. And I went in for it, and one of the leads was a fellow Indian man. And in my role, I had to say a terrorist joke about him. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is still happening. And I mean, the show is not doing well, by the way. So that's kind of cool. But in terms of, these were white men who are attempting to make a diverse show. And I'm sure like you guys can kind of figure out what it is. But yeah, at that point I was just like, I can't believe this is still happening. I always try to, like you said, take back the narrative. And I'm always writing characters for Indian females. For my project with Macro is about women in tech, because I actually have an engineering degree and I worked for a tech company, which was hilarious in itself. So I take so much of your own experiences are not out there. You can't see them on TV, you can't see them in the movies. And people, like everyone that's sitting up here, is hungry to buy those ideas. In terms of the clip you saw from the trailer for Cowboy and Indian, the short film that I did, I just sold it to Super Deluxe as a 1-hour drama series. And they are leaning into my background and me being Indian and being a Hindu and going to the temple growing up. And I'm just like, I can't believe someone is actually paying me to do this and like tell my story that I've never seen before on TV or in a movie theater. And I think if you really look into yourself and ask yourself, what is the story that only I can tell? And it's there, if you get it out there, these people will be lining up to buy it.
As just a devil's advocate, though, I mean, there are white men in this room who want to make things, and you say there were white guys trying to make a diverse show and it's not going well. Like, what is the solution there?
Talk to people who are not white.
Surround yourself with diversity.
It's real simple.
I surround myself with diversity.
Have a diverse writers' room. Those statistics just came out that were so awful.
Like it's crazy to me.
I guess I mean in terms of someone who is trying to be an ally or who is trying to tell other stories, right?
Listen.
That's what it is. Like talk to people who that experience is theirs. Look, so that you can understand it. And here's the thing: it's not that like you can't write these stories, but don't attempt to write these stories if you're not going to do the work to write it correctly. So, case in point, we do have a series at Macro called Beast Mode that I hope I'm saying his name right. I think David Schneiderman is the writer, but it's based on this Black lesbian boxing trainer, Ann Wolfe, who is out of Austin, Texas, and this phenomenal lady. And the story is super phenomenal. It's this great drama about this woman, boxer trainer, who's like trying to, save her business and trying to be a better mother for her estranged daughters and all of these things. And it's such a super specific, character. But I remember the very first time I started reading this pilot, I was just lost in this world, and it was so believable, and I was just like, this is so great. Like, her voice was so incredible, all the characters were so incredible, and I kept looking back to, like, the title page, like, written by David Schneiderman for real? Like, okay, David, get in there. and when we met him, he's like, he reached out to Ann Wolfe and he studied a lot of her work and talked to her quite a bit about her experience being a Black lesbian woman in the boxing world. And I think that's what it is. It's like, don't make assumptions that you can put words into the mouth of these characters without some level of research and some level of context. And that context is all around you, hopefully, in your life.
Kay Oyegun, who writes for This Is Us and also for Queen Sugar, was talking about this recently. And she was basically like, if you're writing diversity to like get your money, that is not gonna work out well. What you're doing is, it's like tokenism, right? And it's perfectly fine if you're a white person to tell stories about white people. Nobody is suggesting, and then in that case, it's like, think about how you're building what's happening behind the camera to get a different lens on that particular story. If you're telling a story about Appalachia, if you wanna make a movie about the opioid crisis in Appalachia right now, like, that's a story that's mostly about white people, right? There's nothing wrong with writing a story about white people.
But also, maybe you should go to Appalachia and talk to these people so you're writing about those white people in the right way.
That's exactly. It's actually, do you love the characters? Because what you're talking about is somebody who loves his subject so much and empathizes so much with her. And that's just about your creative process. If you're like, gotta put brown and blue people in this to make sure that I'm being politically correct, then it's like sort of missing the point of the creative life and the creative possibility of bringing diversity into your work. And so I think it's about what you said first, which is the collaborators. Who are you collaborating with and why? But really why?
I think part of the talk about diversity and inclusion goes hand in hand with the changing landscape in terms of technology as well, and just other avenues that people have. And all of you have in some way found success in digital platforms or things like that. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about different things that are out there that maybe we don't know in terms of, we know the mainstream YouTube or Facebook, stuff like that, but what else is out there?
Voice is going to be key. When you think about Alexis in your home, and Amazon and Google Home, hey, buy me that soap, and then it picks the soap for you. How did that brand buy that spot. Well, think about how that translates and segues into content creation for people sitting in the house listening to some voice. I know, there's a lady on Facebook who chews pickles. I don't know if anybody's seen that.
Please explain.
A woman sits and chews pickles to the microphone, and it's like supposed to be satisfying videos, and she's killing it. She's killing it. So one thing we're looking at a lot is.
Will you be
voice.
reaching out?
No, I don't think
Insane.
so.
It's insane, but when you monetize something like that, she's actually killing it. I know it sounds.
So are you monetizing it, Sam?
I'm not. She's
Okay.
not my client. I'm not getting the pickle girl. But what I will say.
She's chewing pickles, and people are like, "Girl, yes."
You know the satisfying, like, yeah, she does it very sensual. I know somebody's in here has seen that video. Somebody's shaking their head, nodding their head. So she got a fan. He's a huge fan. Huge fan.
I think the way she does it.
Very sensual. She's sensual.
It's
She,
sensual.
She eats the pickle, like chews, like articulates
I'm
the chew.
done.
She articulates the chew.
You're taking me out the paint.
Either way, its voice, I think, is going to integrate into our lives, into mass media much more than it is right now. Right now. But yeah, voice. That's my thing.
I have to, because that made me so uncomfortable, just draw a distinction between what we do and the pickle chews of the world.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Which is
I'm
just that
content creation in voice.
like
is my thing.
there's the unboxing videos of the world, the stuff that is not even unscripted. It's just like out there and satisfying to some subset of people, which we've only known because the internet exists. And then there's art. And I'm not saying that her pickle chewing is not artful. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm not going to make a judgment there. But there is like the craft of the thing that we're trying to do, and you're not always selling to the same audiences, right? If you were going to make a documentary or a series about that included pickle chewing, you would know where to go on the internet to like appeal to that audience, right? But also just I think it's important to remember that like while we are in a world where that is a distraction, just like we're all sort of competing against cat videos, I think that's a difficult kind of like mental rabbit hole to go down because it doesn't really take into account the amount of time people are spending watching like really crafted things and paying attention to where and how those crafted things are getting disseminated. So there are comedy specials, right? And there's the video portion and there's the audio portion. The audio portion got bought by Amazon because Amazon was thinking ahead to the place where everybody's listening to everything in their houses, right? And so now they have audible.com. So when there are pieces of the things that you're doing that you can break out for a Spotify playlist and something that is audible, podcast,
Like the pickle juice.
Right, you can co-brand your pickle juice, I don't know. But like you do want to think about the different modes of digital consumption and how they can affect you and how that those crafts are a little bit different, right? Like the comedy special that plays really well totally by audio is different than a comedy special that like has a lot of visual stuff in it, and you might want to record 2 versions of that thing to make sure that you can exploit both of those channels. That's sort of what you meant, right? Is like thinking about
Sort of.
I don't think that's what he meant.
Okay.
No, it is.
all.
It is.
But-
The key is that voice will be much more prevalent in our lives when it comes to media consumption. That's all.
I think to some of what you were saying, I think we have to be careful about putting ourselves on a pedestal, because at the end of the day, content is content, and we're all competing for people's time and energy to consume that content. So, right now, it is interesting how successful videos of people taking out children's toys and showing how to play with those toys. Like, kids are going ham for that. But it's like, okay, well, what would be really cool if you figure out your craft and your writing craft or directing craft or whatever that is, and figure out how to merge that phenomenon with narrative or scripted content in some way, then I think you're like totally winning. Do I have that solution? No. But if you figure that out, holler at me.
I do think one of the things we're saying here is format doesn't really matter anymore. You don't have to worry about the 22-minute or the 46-minute or the hour long or the half an hour, like, because we're all moving towards streaming subscription anyway, like the length of the thing matters way less now, and you're still able to actually have like a saleable piece of content at lots of different lengths. Like pretty much all of the series we distribute at Seed and Spark are short form, right? Like under 10-minute episodes. I find that really exciting because you can binge an entire season in an hour, right? And have like a really delightful experience. And that's just a totally new format that's been given to us by the internet that is getting sort of fancier and fancier, even as it remains cheap, right? Because the concepts are getting weirder.
Off of that, you think about Katzenberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who gave us Pixar, sort of disruptor in the film business, has now got Wonder Co. He's raising $2 billion to buy all your content, to stretch a minute's worth of content from an average of $5,000 to $7,000 budget to $125,000 per minute. So he's basically going to make no more than 10-minute Michael Bay films, or a Judd Apatow comedy in 10 minutes, dumping the kind of money that they would have dumped in a blockbuster last year into 10 minutes of content. So I think he sees that the demand on in Gen Z and young millennials, their taste is maturing as they mature. They're going off to colleges. 90% TV sales are up last year among Gen Z, expected to go another 90% this year, which means they're buying their first TV. They're spending their first money on their first big asset, and it's a TV. It's actually 90% of content intake is taken in on the TV now. It's not so much so the mobile anymore, but as their taste matures, they're still fans of the internet-born content creator, not so much Miles Teller, who I'm sure we all love, but they're more dedicated to the icon that came up organically by themselves off the internet, combated the basic studio system and managers and reps, and did it themselves. And as they grow and they land on TV, King Batch on TV now, and all these guys in different movies, their fans are growing and they're maturing, and their tastes are bringing them back to TV and back to higher quality content. So you could write your 10-minute piece and maybe blow it out on a budget when you write it, and not really be contained to, I can only make this for $5,000, because there are buyers looking to make things for $2 million for a 10-minute piece.
And Gary, I wanted to throw it to you too, because we were talking earlier, and I placed myself outside of your demographic, but you said I'm really not, in terms of both being a woman and over 30. I didn't say that to everyone, but that it really is a much more diverse audience than we think it is. And when I went to the website, I expected to see a certain something, and then saw that you have scripted series and you have news shows and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our company, Machinima was born 12 years ago in that very first YouTube boom. So I think when people look at our company, they assume digital native, digital equating to younger, when really our audience from 12 years ago has grown and evolved with us. So when it started out just as sort of video game reviews and let's play content 10 or 12 years ago, when a lot of our audience was 13 or 14, now they're in their mid-20s, now they're in their early 30s. Now a lot of them are passing the Machinima brand and content down to their own children even. So our audience, like I said earlier, it's a third of our audience is women. A lot of people don't assume that because they associate us with gaming, and gaming is associated with white and male. A big portion of our audience is over 30. I think we traffic more 25 and over than we do 24 and under. But the natural assumption with us, because we started out as a YouTube brand and are digital native, is people associate us more with youth culture than adult culture. And I think to that point of people growing up, people making their first purchases, people staying loyal to certain brands, that's how Machinima has been able to evolve and grow and become a place now where we operate both as a studio and a production company. We operate social lines of businesses through YouTube and influencers, but we also, we've sold shows to multiple platforms, and we've produced shows for networks like the CW. It's an evolution of what people assume the audience is that I think gets lost in translation oftentimes.
We have about 10 minutes before we're going to get to our Q&A portion. So I thought maybe what we could do is think about what piece of advice would you give to this audience who are mostly actors who are looking to create their own content. It can either be advice of like how you think they should start, or advice to, you know, once you get there, you should be aware of that type of thing.
Go ahead.
I would just say, when you're going to write an essay or something, you got to come up with a thesis. Just figure out why you want to do what you're doing, and use that as your sort of compass moving forward. I know it's a bit lofty, it might sound, but truly, the talent we work with, I ask them what their vision is, what kind of conversations they're having with themselves in the future, who do they want to be, where do they want to end up, what kind of, how do they want to help society? And it's a little bit beyond just the art, but it's like, how do you, ask yourself the questions? How do you sort of bring everything together and realize your dream, but also kind of figure out what your focus is and move forward with that, stay the course?
Yeah, I think that sort of ties into what we talked about earlier with, when you're chasing the buck, people can tell. So whatever story you're trying to tell, whatever you're trying to get across, be authentic to yourself. Don't chase what's hot. Don't chase what's socially relevant. Don't say, these 3 types of shows just sold to networks this week, so I'm going to craft a pitch just like that. Be true to yourself, because people can tell when you're chasing the buck.
Yeah. I would just say find your creative tribe. So writers, directors, producers, find your team that you can create amazing content for yourself and for people that'll actually want to watch it and consume it. And festivals are really great to do that. I love going to all of the shorts programs to find fresh talent, fresh writers and directors and young producers. So it's very, very important to find your creative tribe.
I would say that there's no excuse right now to not be making content. You can't just be an actor anymore. You have to write. You have to just get out your iPhone and shoot something. I'm seeing, my short has been making the festivals, and within the groups of the shorts that I'm seeing with mine, there are some amazing shorts with like funny, heartwarming stories that aren't technically that great. And those are the ones that are getting seen and getting picked up by production companies because they can see the potential in this short, regardless of if the lighting's right or if the sound is right, because you can definitely see the characters and their relationships. So I would just say, even if you don't have a great camera or you don't have lighting, I would say definitely try to get sound. Just try to get sound.
But you can figure that out and not spend a lot of money.
Yeah, you can figure that out. And so I would just say go out and shoot it and just make sure that you have a great story, great characters, and the relationships are there, and someone will be interested in that.
There's a company that sells something called an iLav, and that is a lavalier microphone that plugs into your cell phone. You can download a $4.99 app called Apogee and get pretty great sound. And using literally your cell phone as a what am I trying to say? It's like, thank you, as your lav. That's what I meant. That's what I already said. I hate to finish because those are all the best pieces of advice, and mine is going to be terribly unsexy. Be a business person, and that means you can't be afraid of data. You need to gather your data. You need to gather the email addresses of your audiences. You need to know where they are. You need to know what social channels they came in from. And the way that I can help you think about this so that it doesn't make your butthole clench is looking at this stuff will actually help make you a better storyteller. Because if you are experimenting with getting content out there on Facebook, you're doing like Facebook Lives, and then on Instagram, you're doing Instagram stories, or you're posting really beautiful photos, and then on Twitter, you're like practicing your editing skills. You're like, screw you, 280 characters, I stay 140 forever. And you like practice your editing there. And then you look at how people respond, and you engage with people, and you see what works and you see what doesn't. and you incorporate that back into your creative work while you are also establishing an online identity. You're getting better at interacting with your audience. You're getting better at being a creative person, and you're also gathering the data that any buyer will tremendously value, and be able to make smarter marketing and distribution decisions, which will get your stuff seen more widely, which will make you make more things. So just don't be afraid to also be a boss person about your work.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I recently sat down this week with a young man, Melvin Gregg, who started out on Vine and has really just been a digital powerhouse with whatever platform he chooses. And from that, we put him in one of our films, The Land, a couple years ago, and he's been in a lot of other traditional acting roles. And it was just amazing to talk to him about how he's just so focused on utilizing analytics from Facebook and using that platform to experiment with characters, to experiment with all of the storytelling and different series that he has in mind. But he's got a very methodical process of I'm going to test out these characters on these days and figure out, where do people drop off? What's the link that people really like? And he's, built a studio for himself, and it's just all about creating content constantly and testing and learning from it in a very real way. So, yeah. What's his name? Melvin Gregg.
That actually was just made me think of one last question is, could you tell us all one thing to watch for inspiration? It can be your own project, it can be something else that you saw, a client's project. Just what's one thing people should write down that they should check out right away?
The thing that I've been watching constantly, and I don't know what type of inspiration it'll bring to you creatively, but I can't stop watching it, is it's the new video, Lemon, with Nerd and Rihanna. It's kind of fantastic. Yeah. She chews on lemons? No. No.
I was never an animation girl, and about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I started watching a lot of animation and obsessed with Bob's Burgers and their tight writing, and Big Mouth was amazing as well, and those are also worlds where you just need to get to know that world, this family that works at a burger store, or pubescent adolescents in middle school, high school, and I've been hella inspired with writing an animated series from those shows.
I'm really into Room 104, the Duplass brothers' new series on HBO, because I was I didn't know you could do that on television. It's an indie film. It's a genius indie film convention turned into an anthology series. Everything happens in the same hotel room, but it can happen any year with any set of characters. And they're incredibly diverse stories, but 1.5 hour is an entire dance piece. That's there's no dialogue, it's 2 women dancing, and that's the episode. I was I didn't even know you could do that. I literally didn't know you could do that. And so it's really inspiring to me because they took their super scrappy $10,000 feature film mentality and turned it into an HBO series. So there is a total creative superpower in really knowing how to be super indie and writing things that can be done for cheap spectacularly.
Rick and Morty, too.
I would throw it back to a film competition that you participated in last year called Interpretations that NBC Universal did with Justin Lin's digital company. And where I think you can find inspiration in that is the rules of the film competition were pretty simple. Everyone's given the same 4 lines of dialogue, and the rest of the story is up to you. So just looking at something like that as a model of how you can challenge yourself to tell different kinds of stories with a very limited sort of working base is always something that I find fun. Like just watching that sort of thing, knowing that the 4 pieces of dialogue are always going to be the same, but every filmmaker's got their own perspective, their own point of view, and this is going to be a different tale no matter what. Like that's something you guys should draw on to sort of challenge yourself and sharpen those skills.
I will say it was incredibly fun to participate in, but it was even better to see what came out of it from everyone. Yeah.
And no attachment, but if you haven't seen Ozark, I think that's a great example
So good.
of just keeping it tight, contained. Jason Bateman's best.
All right, let's give our panel a round of applause. Yes, thank you so much. I think this panel just like whipped us into shape. Like, just do it. So before you leave, just 1 second, Jody is going to just wrap us up after this wonderful day today, and thank you guys again for being here.
Thank you so much to this amazing panel. Thank you to you all. I just, for me, just sitting here all day with you, I think that we talked about the unconscious bias in the beginning. And besides the people that we encounter in our everyday lives as actors, casting us, or producers, what's the unconscious in our own minds that keep us back from, this man here who had this film with, half Spanish, that's your own unconscious bias that, where's the audience for that? I don't know. No, keep going. Don't allow your own restrictions in your own mind to stop you up. I mean, that's really, for me, that's the most important thing, that we shift here. Because then we can go on and get those 10 pages written every day and grab the person that was sitting next to you and say, hey, let's get together this week and show each other the 10 pages. And we keep going on to create content for these people and for ourselves to get our stories out there. So thank you so much, really, to our committee, to our staff. Bravo to you for spending the time here. Keep going.